Nadine, you've worked in Canadian law enforcement and you've done a lot of activism fighting against the worst kind of people on this earth. Can you give us some insight into how you got into that? What inspired you?
Sure. So I'm a former Mountie, so an RCMP officer. If I was to compare what that is to the States, that would be like the FBI. But we also do regular policing. And so what kind of led me to join that, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And my offender went through the court system, went to jail and stuff, and it kind of got me to realize there's a lot of people out there that need help, and it's actually what led me to becoming a police officer. I had a dream of working in the ICE unit, which is the Internet Child Exploitation Unit. Sex offenders aren't like you and I, so it's hard to understand how they work because they don't think like anything like you and I. They live in a complete different reality. So one of the biggest thing is don't ever think someone's not an offender. And I'm not saying everyone's guilty, but there's certain criterias that you can obviously look for.
Good evening, my name is Justice Smith with Proverbs Media Group, and today we're here at CPAC 2025, live, talking to a very special guest who has some very important insights that every single viewer at home needs to hear. Nadine Ness, thank you for coming to our show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to have you. I want to give some background to our viewers at home so they get an idea about what you do and what you've been through and what you've been doing. Nadine, you've worked in Canadian law enforcement. And you've done a lot of activism fighting against the worst kind of people on this earth. Can you give us some insight into how you got into that? What inspired you?
Sure. So I'm a former Mountie, so an RCMP officer. If I was to compare what that is to the States, that would be like the FBI. But we also do regular policing. And so what kind of led me to join that, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And my offender went through the court system, went to jail and stuff, and it kind of got me to realize there's a lot of people out there that need help, and it's actually what led me to becoming a police officer. I had a dream of working in the ICE unit, which is the Internet Child Exploitation Unit, and so I took all the training necessary that I could possibly take to work in the ICE unit, and some of that training was on how to profile child sex offenders. So pedophiles, but there's also sex offenders that aren't pedophiles, but that still offend on children. So I took the training to do that. And unfortunately, a medical condition that confined me to a wheelchair got me to leave policing, but I'm glad it did because it put me in an opportunity where I could speak to some of the stuff that I was witnessing in the world. And because I wasn't tied down by a job where you can't talk sometimes, I was able to start talking about the sexualization of children in schools. So with that, we had a big scandal, and I'm also the founder and president of the biggest conservative organization in Canada, mostly in Saskatchewan. And with that, we were kind of the hub of all the scandals that was happening in the school with the gender ideology, but not just that, the sexualization of children. So we started exposing what was happening in Saskatchewan, most importantly. And there was a big scandal. I don't know if you've heard about it, but Planned Parenthood had gone to the school to do a sex education, but they had brought these porn cards. I wouldn't even be able to read to you what was in there, even as someone who's trained to profile sex offenders. I hadn't heard some of the terms that were on those cards, and they were, I guess, shown to the kids and engaged with the kids. And with that, I'm like, why is Planned Parenthood doing this? So I did a deep dive. I'm also trained to profile pedophile activism. So I did a deep dive into this organization and some of their ties as to what they were planning for sexual education. So there was a big conspiracy of several groups trying to revamp sexual education to be a pleasure-based sexual education. So which is right in line with pedophile activism. So if you teach children, if it feels good, it is good. it goes in line with the whole agenda. So I did a deep dive into some of these organizations, and some of them had actual pedophile logos right on their website, the main page. And we did a big expose. It went insanely viral throughout Canada. The third-party organization got banned from all the schools, and some of the organization I reported on actually went bankrupt a couple months ago. So huge wins in Canada. So for protecting children. So even though I don't do it with the ICE, I think the lasting effect of the work that I've done might even end up protecting way more children in the long run.
God bless you.
Thank you.
I'm moved by your story. I'm sorry for everything that you've been through. And I think it's so powerful that you've transmuted that negative experience into positive activism to protect other women and children and even men and boys. I think it's so powerful that you've taken a stance against this threat that we have against our society. And one of the things that you mentioned that I'm very curious about, and I know a lot of our viewers are going to be curious about. So you mentioned that you've gotten a large, in-depth background into learning how to profile these child sex offenders. And I want to know what that looks like. And I want our viewers to know what that looks like so that they have the same tools at your disposal, that we may go on to influence and help someone that can protect a child or anyone out there that needs protection.
Well, one of the biggest things when I was trained to profile a sex offender is they train you to get them out of a box. So we have this box that we put people in, that they fit in there. Sex offenders aren't like you and I, so it's hard to understand how they work because they don't think like anything like you and I. They live in a complete different reality. So one of the biggest thing is don't ever think someone's not an offender. And I'm not saying everyone's guilty, but there's certain criterias that you can obviously look for. So a sex offender won't just groom their victims. We hear about grooming the victims and their surrounding a lot, but one of the things that people don't understand is they groom themselves into position where they have unsupervised access to children. So that's why there's certain criterias or certain jobs that sex offenders will go into. So that's why you have higher numbers of sex offenders like teachers. Why? They have easy access unsupervised to children. That's why the churches are one of the biggest target for sex offenders. They have automatic trust. They have easy access to children unsupervised. That's why coaches or outside organization like Scouts. So they'll work for like 8-10 years to groom themselves into a position where they can gain the trust of children, gain the trust of their parents, as well as gain access to children. Now, there's offenders who physically offend on children, but there's also the offenders who haven't yet offended on children, however, access porn, which in essence, it is offending on children because a child has been hurt to create that. So what do you look for? There's so many different things. One of the things that always stands out to me, an offender that I think your viewers will find interesting that would never thought about, an offender will often want to gain the trust of the child. So if ever you see an adult touching your child, not necessarily inappropriate, but touching your child in front of you, they do that to say to the child, see, mom's okay with me touching you. So that's one of the things. If you see someone constantly touching your child and you're like, why are they? There's usually something in your gut that tells you, hey, I don't think this is right, but you just justify it away because you don't want to think that someone might be doing something. The biggest piece of advice I would say is trust that gut instinct. We all have been in situations, even with children. I have 4 of my own where I'm like, I don't like how that person looked at my child. But you just push it away because you put them in a box, right? You put all these people in a box. And the best piece of advice is trust your gut. And as a former cop who knows how real the risk is, be very careful with the people who want to have unsupervised access to your child. If somebody is super nice and says, I'll help you, I'll babysit for you, I'll have the child over, I would say, I'm one of those paranoid parents. I don't allow my children to go to sleepovers. That's one of the biggest times that it does occur. I'm trying to think. Pedophiles don't always look the part. We always think it's going to be the creepy guy with like the creepy glasses, the pedophile glasses, I call them. You probably know what I'm talking about, the old school. Yeah. Yeah, and some do look like that, but not all of them. Quite often, they'll be very charming people that you have in your life that you wouldn't think for a second. So, but if sometimes you might have that little glimpse, something wasn't right, but again, you push it away. The majority of people do, and it's actually human nature to do that. We are designed to get along cohesively in community, so we don't want confrontation. We don't want like bad things to happen. And unfortunately, a lot of times there was warning signs and parents just pushed it away. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Now, what are other things that makes it high risk? Again, someone who goes into a job to have access unsupervised to children. So that would be one of the things. And I don't want people to think that it's only certain kids that are targeted. You can have children who come from very good, strong families that get targeted. So sometimes we'll think it's the most vulnerable children who become targeted, but that's not always the case. It could be, you could be really close to your family and still be targeted. Again, it's that unsupervised access to children. That's the biggest thing. And also family members. One of the box that often pedophiles will be put into is, they'll never offend on their own kids. They'll only offend on outside kids. But a lot of the time, almost 80% of sex offenders who offend on other children have offended on their own kids. So they're not in the same box we are. So the biggest piece of advice is don't put them in a box. If your children are going overnight to family members, I would be very careful. There are certain things you can look for. Like one of the strange phenomenon that we were taught about is, and I'm not saying every sex offender has this, and I'm not saying everyone who has this is a sex offender, but one of the things that came up constantly with victims and offenders was a specific type of speech impediment. So most people don't know that, but it's a kind of a list that almost sounds like an English accent, and they don't know why that phenomenon is like that. So a lot of the sex offenders that we were profiled on had that slight speech impediment. There's so many little things. Like, again, I could go on for days on different things that kind of are considered red flags. But yeah, if you go out in the community and you see there's children everywhere, you can see when a man looks at a woman with lust. You can see that as well in children. And so if you see somebody who's looking at your child just slightly too long, again, listen to that gut instinct. Don't push it away. And yeah, I don't know if you have any more questions or if you're just blown away.
This subject material is obviously upsetting. Mm-hmm. It leaves me speechless, and I'm very seldom in a situation where I'm not sure exactly what I should say. And I think I first should express gratitude to you that your willingness to speak out about these kind of things is going to allow access to the regular viewer at home mm-hmm. to have some of this insight and maybe protect one of their loved ones. And just some of these tactics that you're pointing out that these people are employing to be predators to children, it's so diabolical. Mm-hmm. It's sick. It's really sick. Wow. I applaud your courage. Thank you for sharing with us. And anything else? I'm curious. This is actually quite mm-hmm. fascinating. What are some of these other red flags?
There's some that I know that I can't even say publicly, because if I was to say publicly, they'd be like, oh, you're targeting a specific group of people. But there are certain things that increases the risk of potentially being a pedophile. So one of the things, not all pedophiles fit this criteria, but one of the profile is you'll have pedophiles that will have family, that will disguise themselves into families, but you'll often have some that won't have family. So you know how, and this is not targeting, again, a specific group, but you know the history of the Catholic Church. There was a lot of pedophiles that hid in the church. Well, one of the criterias, the reason they could hide is they wouldn't need to have a wife. They would have access to unsupervised children. So that would be, if you see someone who's an adult, who's never married, never had a girlfriend, kind of awkward around adults, but yet is super comfortable around children, usually they'll be like a balloon clown, or they'll go into these positions where they don't have to interact as much with adult. So that would fit a specific type of sex offender. Again, they don't all fit in that, but that would be one of them. If it's an adult that's super awkward with other adults, but yet super good with children, that would be like a red flag. I'm trying to think of many other ones. We had last week, I actually had a guest on my show in Canada. Her name's Kelly Palfy. So I'm going to give her a plug. She wrote a book called Men Too. So it's to play on Me Too, but it talks about sexual abuse of boys, men. So that's her focus. But she used to be a police officer who worked in the ICE unit, and then she became a psychologist to help victims of abuse. One of the biggest things that we notice in the world of even internet child exploitation, you hear a lot about the female victims getting justice and coming forward, but it's very rare that you hear men coming forward, and that is for many reasons. But one of the biggest things is a lot of the times the boys are not believed. So you know how when you hear of a teacher offending on a boy, and people, like a 14-year-old boy, and they'll be like, oh, but she was so hot. He's lucky she went after him. Like, the whole mentality is completely different when it comes to female offenders. But I want to add, female offenders are a lot more common than the general public thinks. What's your, I guess, idea of how many female offenders to male would there be in society? Like percentage?
I have no idea, but if I had to guess, I would say it'd be fractional.
So about 1 in 6 offenders is a female. Sex offenders is a female. So we always assume that females are not dangerous, but they're very much are a threat. It's just, unfortunately, male victims, which are often like the preferred for female. It's not the same with male offenders, but because of that, a lot of males don't come forward. There's like deep shame where it attacks their masculinity if they were to come forward. So Kelly Palfy, that I had on my show last week, we talked specifically about that, and we talked about specifically about pedophiles hiding in the church, because I find it's something that the church doesn't want to address. And I'm a Christian myself. I'm a God-fearing woman. But and my offender was also an elder in the church, and it actually pushed me. If it's okay, I'm going to get spiritual a little bit here. But it pushed me away from God. I was an atheist for most of my life up until, I think it was in 2015 that God came into my life. And so many people who experience sexual abuse, 1 in 4 women, by the time they reach 18 years of age, will be sexually abused. 1 in 6 boys. So you have people all over out there that's been sexually abused that never come forward. And so not only the people who do come forward get hurt by it, but the people who know it's happening, who are hurt by someone else, also pushes away. So we did an episode on it because we recognize the church are targeted by pedophiles. So are schools and stuff, but we wanted the church to start doing something to protect children. So start talking about what to look for, start putting policies in place so that children aren't left unsupervised with an adult. So always have 2 or 3 teachers in the room and things like that. There's so much that needs to be done. I could talk about it for hours, but I'll never cover everything. Again, my activism has been to expose pedophile activists, because that's very much real and currently happening. It doesn't look like it did in the 80s with NAMBLA, but the same mission and statement is still happening today. But if I can do anything, not just in raising awareness into that, but how does the church, how does the school, how does outside organization like sports protect children? Certain policies need to be put in place to do that. And we're not even going to get into human trafficking, because that's even on another level. But one thing that I feel very blessed for, and I know this is going to sound insane to you, but you asked me, you said you're glad that I'm doing this. I can only do this because God healed my trauma. And I actually look at what happened to me as a child, and I consider this a blessing. And I know that sounds insane, but I wouldn't be able to do what I do. I wouldn't have become a police officer. I wouldn't have taken the training, and I wouldn't have been able to protect the thousands of children that I've been able to protect if that hadn't happened to me. So and the only thing that brought me healing was Jesus Christ. I was a mess before he came into my life. So if there's someone out there who has been victimized and you don't know how to handle it or heal from it, Jesus is the answer to that. He's the only one who can take apart all the broken pieces and put it together. So I'm going to keep fighting and keep doing that, because it is the most evil thing in the world. It is. Because it doesn't just physically hurt. It's not sin that's outside of the body either. It's sin that's deep inside. It really, really harms a person. And it's not just physically where you heal a wound that's physically outside. It's something you constantly have to fight back. Like the shame, the guilt, all the emotions that come with it. And yeah, Jesus is the only one who can really, really heal that. I hope it's okay I talk about God, because he's the reason for everything for me. So.
Yes. This is a Christian podcast.
Okay, good.
God bless you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy that Jesus was able to come into your life and help you and heal you and give you motivation and that push to recover from what's happened to you and find positive in what's happened and be able to transcend and move toward a better place. And I thank you so much for coming on our show. I would love to talk to you again in the future. I would love to ask you more about the criminal organizations, the actual human trafficking organizations, how to recognize them, the kind of symbols they may use. And I think that this could be really good, that we let the people know everything they need to know, have them have every tool in their arsenal to protect their children and protect their loved ones. I
just want to add one more point. Sometimes we think that the problem is not as bad as it used to be. But with the internet, the incoming of the internet, we were taught on how a pedophile goes from having just one sick thought to actually offending. And the easy access to child that's available today creates more pedophiles than it did way back when. It creates more pedophiles who are willing to act on it. So with that, there's way more out there than there used to be. And secondly, the internet has also created easy access to children. If you think your children aren't being targeted online, they are. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I had some really strong conversations what it would look like if an adult, and so she is online, but she tells me and shows me everything because we've had these discussions. But she's had 4 adult men approach her online already, and she doesn't have photos, she doesn't have her age, nothing. But So if your children have access to internet, even if it's Roblox, they're even on Roblox. So go anywhere to have easy access to children, like to communicate. So human trafficking is not just something that's happening in Mexico at the border. It's happening even online. They can get your children to leave in the middle of the night anywhere in Canada. It doesn't matter what your family status is. I was talking to a family in Saskatchewan where there was this girl who started talking to this guy online, and he ended up coming and picking her up, and she was being human trafficked in Regina, Saskatchewan. Thankfully, they were able to find her within a week, but there was so much harm already done. And that's just in Saskatchewan, Canada, where you think it wouldn't happen. You think it happens at the border. Again, the biggest thing, don't put them in a box. Don't put what can happen to your family in a box. Oh, it'll never happen to me. As a parent, we have that ultimate duty to protect our children. And if there's one thing you can do, you can physically do, is protect them so that they never become a victim the way I had when I was a child.
Thank you very much
Thanks.
for sharing your testimony and providing this high level of value to our viewers. And I look forward to speaking to you again. God bless you.
Thank you.
And continue doing your good work.
Thanks.
Thank you.